All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again from the Nonprofit Partnership. My name is Christina Krischbaum. I'm the Program Manager for TNP, and glad to have you back for another HR check-in with Ann Laguzza of the Works Consulting. This week's topic, making the check-ins practical. So we're looking at preparing everybody if you're looking at going back into your workspaces and really looking at what you need to put together to create a safe atmosphere for yourself and for your teams. So without further ado, before I forget, forgive me, I want to thank our sponsor for our HR check-ins, making it possible for TNP to bring these to you free of charge, the Josephine S. Gumbiner Foundation. Thank you so much for your continued support of our efforts in bringing this information to our nonprofit community. So without further ado, Ann, you all set?
I am ready. Here we go. Let's see what happens. Good morning, everyone. I am Ann Laguzza. I am the CEO of the Works Consulting. I have been in human resources and leadership development for 29 years, and then I started the Works Consulting 19 years ago. I have been a friend of the partnership for many, many years, well over 10. I've actually lost track. At some point, I'm going to go back and look for my very first communications and the dates on there, but it's been a very long time. So for those of you who've been jumping in on Fridays, I really appreciate it. It's been great for me to do these. And in the beginning, it was something I could count on because everything was so uncertain. I mean, I know life's never certain, but wow, we really had our dose of uncertainty. And it was so nice to have some certain things to count on. And as we've been moving forward, we just keep trying to bring you topics that are, you know, at the forefront, most progressive we can find. So I always like to mention at this point that we, both the partnership and myself, have social media connections. And if you aren't connected with us, I really recommend that you do. I know for myself, although I do some, cross-platform sharing of information, there is a unique information on each of my platforms. So I greatly appreciate it if you follow. And I know that I keep watching these great interviews of executive directors and on the partnerships Facebook page, I think is what it is. So I love that. It's so fun to keep in contact with the community. So today we're doing HR check-in, making the check-ins practical. And I'm going to move to this first slide because this is really how we got this idea to do this. So, hey, Ann, do you have a template for that? So in a lot of these sessions, I've been talking about different documents that you might want to use. And often the question is, hey, can I get a template for that? And one of the things in my company that we do is we do design forms and letters for people. And even though I get it that some of the content is consistent because it's legal language, sort of, we do customize for every situation. Believe it or not, you would think like, oh, you could get a template for that letter, and you kind of can, but then there's tweaks, and this person, it's for this reason, but not this reason. They have this, but not that. So I don't give out just templates typically. Occasionally I will make them available, but I usually customize everything that I do for my clients. So with that being said, I was like, you know what, let's just give you everything you need to go into these templates that you want, and then you'll have your own template. Okay, so you can make your own template. One of the things I forgot to mention when we got started, again, just for those of you who haven't joined us before, the Q&A box is what we use during this time. You do not need to hold on to your questions till the end, although that is when I will get to them. I usually present for 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And then you will be able to, you can certainly ask your questions, and then I will get to you at the very end. And the questions are open, so it does not have to be just related to what we're talking about today. It can be whatever HR related questions you have or leadership development questions you have.
You're good to go.
All right, awesome. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna start with the employee survey. And the purpose of the employee survey is obtaining employee feedback on returning to the office. Now, some of you may have already done this, but we did talk about it way back when on a webinar, and I got some of those template questions. So I wanted to make sure we kind of hit on these points in case you haven't done it. And I have a client that sort of did an interesting twist on the survey, which I liked, which I'm going to share with you. So this is bringing people back to the office, right? Trying to get a feel for where they're at. So what about returning to the office work are you looking forward to? Now, you may have people returning to the office. You may have people who've been off work and are now coming back to work. So you kind of are going to have to address both depending on what it is. What are your constraints or concerns? What suggestions or recommendations do you have? And then what questions do you have? Okay, so it's simple, it's narrative feedback, and it gives you information. Now, one of the things my client who did, she gave me a couple little twists on these questions, which I included for you to use in your survey. So one of the things that she found very interesting, and I have to agree, this has been very consistent with my clients who have done this, is that employees have an expectation that the employer is going to handle all responsibility for safety in the workplace. And some are saying things like, I won't return until you put up partitions, until you guarantee me that there's hand sanitizer on every desk, until you guarantee me this. So this is very important feedback for the organizations who've done this so far, because you have to prepare for that. You have to prepare for what are you doing, what aren't you doing, and also and how to handle it as people come back. What are their expectations in coming back? How realistic are those? Do we need to sort of manage that a little bit? And then when they come back, what does that look like? I know I've talked in here before, but just to mention again, I mean, and I'm gonna mention this at the very end, but everybody has a responsibility for workplace safety. Yes, as usual, employers always have a little more responsibility because they just do. That's how it's always been, even before this. But this isn't just kind of that arms crossed thing. I'm not returning until you. There are some things you do have to do, and then there's some things that you're not required to do. And employees, this may be a moment where an employee really is going to have to, at some point, make a big decision for themselves. They might not be able to dictate everything that they want. They might get some of it, and then, if it really doesn't feel good to them, and you don't have any other solutions for them, I mean, they might have to make a decision. I mean, it's going to be unfortunate, but I do anticipate it's going to happen in some ways. So the employee survey is one of the templates that we had talked about. It's very simple. You put these questions. They use SurveyMonkey. A lot of my clients are using SurveyMonkey. You can use whatever you're comfortable with, and you just send this out to your employees. You can just do it by email. Make it really easy. Just do it by email and just have them write in their responses. Okay, the return to work letter. I try to put these in some sense of order. That's why I wanted to go back and get the right one. So the purpose of the return to work letter is to return employees from furlough. So if you furloughed employees and now you're bringing them back to work, so they have not been working during this time and you're bringing them back to work, that's the purpose of the return to work letter. So here's what you would include in that. Okay, and this is, you guys literally, I'm telling you exactly what's included in what I write up for my clients. So you should be able to take this and run with it. The date for the return, right? What day do you expect them to be back at work? The position title that they're going to have, what their employment status is it part-time or full-time, and how many hours, their rate of pay or their salary, the date they're notified of the recall. So you want the letter to actually be dated. That might sound silly, but I saw a letter the other day that didn't have a date on it. And then your at-will statement. So anytime you're putting something together like this, just like you do an offer letter, you always want to remind everybody you're at will. You're not guaranteeing employment. You're just telling them you can bring them back at this time. This kind of letter should follow a verbal conversation for sure. I mean, I think it's great to hear, we're so excited, great news, we're able to bring you back off of furlough, and this is what it's going to look like. And this may be, even if they're going to stay remote, or it might be bringing them back to the office. It just really depends. But you're notifying them that they are returning. And you just want to be very clear in the letter of what it is they're returning to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to mail, because I'm talking about old school mail right now. And I'm going to talk about how to mail that. Now, in the few months or so, we may end up changing that a little bit, but you can always use electronic notification also, but I'm always going to tell you to follow up for mail right now. And then you're going to keep a copy in the employee file. They don't have to sign it. I know one of my clients was asking me if every employee had to sign it. They were bringing back about 150 employees. They don't all have to sign it. A letter is sufficient, but you definitely want to keep one in their file, and then you want them to receive one. So a very common follow-up to this particular template is, well, what if they don't want to come back to work, Anne? Because I'm hearing that more and more, that people are declining to come back to work. And I call this a voluntary decline. It's not my children don't have daycare provider. It's not, I am living with someone who's immunocompromised. It's not that, because there are some other, we're going to talk about that. There's some other reasons they might not be able to come back at this point. But this is just, I don't know if I want to come back. I feel concerned. I just don't know if I want to. I mean, I have unfortunately heard, I'm getting more money on unemployment right now. I don't want to come back. So you're going to include, you have to document this. This is very important. When you have that verbal conversation to say, hey, great news, we're able to bring you off of furlough. We want you to come back on June 3rd, let's say. And they say, well, I don't really think I want to come back on June 3rd. Well, the first thing you want to do is open the dialogue. Like, talk to me about that. Hopefully you've already done the survey with them, so you generally know where their concerns are, but we want to open the dialogue. Talk to me a little bit about that. Why don't you want to come back? Because maybe there's something that's happened that they haven't yet disclosed to you. So we want to know that. But when you have to document that you offered them work, it's very important, and that they voluntarily decline. So let's say we get to the point where, nope, they're just voluntarily declining. So first bullet here is to include all the information from the return to work letter. Okay, so everything that you had in the letter above, or in the slide above, which you guys are getting all this. And then state in there that the employee voluntarily declined to return. So just as a reference, I kind of want to go back and say, so you're going to have all of this, on this date, we offered you this position. This was the status. Here's the hours, the pay. This is the date that we want you to return to work. We are at will. And you have notified us, whatever date, however they notified you. Was it via, conference call, or via telephone? Was it via Zoom? What was it? Who did they notify? What their position title is, that they voluntarily declined to return to work. That is a much nicer term, by the way, than refused, which I've seen on a few letters. So voluntarily declined, because that's how I look at it. They're just declining. I'm not making this like a conflict situation. They just don't want to come back to work. And then you need to decide before you send these letters, if you're going to, and before you start bringing people back, if you are going to accept a voluntary resignation at that point. So I will share with you, I have a great, I've worked with many, many great employment attorneys, and one of them, we talk quite a bit. We've helped each other through a lot of this interesting time. And we go back and forth on this. Now, technically, if someone declines to come back to work, technically, you don't have to keep their job for them. And again, I'm not talking about any other reasons other than I just don't want to. Not any protected reasons, just I don't want to. I'm afraid, but there's no imminent danger, because that's what OSHA says. There has to be imminent danger. If there's no imminent danger and I don't feel like it, which I am hearing my clients call me and tell me this is happening. You have to decide at that point, are you going to say, okay, well, we'll accept this as your voluntary resignation. And if you change your mind, and you ever want to come back and work for us, just let us know. And if we have something available, we would absolutely consider you. Or are you going to perhaps say, how much more time do you think you need? And maybe they'll say, gosh, everything just started opening up. Could I have maybe like another, maybe 14 days just to see what that all looks like? Well, you might be like, okay, we'll give you 14 more days. I mean, it's unpaid time, right? It's not that it's not you're paying them for anything. So you might be willing to do that. But I do want to mention that you really want to have that decided before you start going out and bringing people back. Because as I say this a lot, we want to be consistent. We don't want to just help out the people we like and not help out the people we don't like. So you want to always look at objective criteria that you're using if you're going to be offering different options for people. But I think you should decide in advance. And you might say, you know what, if somebody tells me they're not coming back and they ask for 2 more weeks, we'd be willing to let anybody get another 2 weeks. And then they would have to come back, or we'll accept their voluntary resignation. So you could certainly do that. So if you are accepting voluntary resignation, you're going to put that in this letter. You're going to say, and as a result of your, voluntary declination of the work that's available, we have accepted your voluntary resignation. We wish you all the best, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So you're going to need to decide that. I can't tell you that has to be in the letter, because you're going to need to decide how you're handling that. Now, the attorney I work with, they're in an industry where they always need people. It's a very high turnover industry. So he doesn't do the voluntary resignation. He just says, okay, because they're off work, and he's like, okay, well, call us when you want to come back to work and we'll see what we have available. So he doesn't actually accept a resignation at that point, but that just may not be your situation. I mean, you're gonna have to think about that for every position if people decide not to come back. It might be one person, it might be more than one person.
And we do have a question in the Q&A that might be appropriate to ask at this point.
Oh, good.
So if you want to take a look at that.
Yeah, let me get up there. Does offering work have any impact on their employment status? Okay, so that's a great question. And ideally it should. This is why I want you to document that you offered them work back. So I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing, and I haven't actually put this to the test. I have some employers that are offering work back and people are voluntarily declining, and they are contacting the EDD. I don't know that anyone's had a great success getting through yet, but I do have a feeling, and some of you may not have experienced this yet, EDD does do audits, and sometimes it's much later. Sometimes it's a year later. They will do audits to see if an employee should have received as much unemployment as they received. So I want it documented that you offered them work and that they declined, and that goes in their employee file, and you're going to mail a copy to them. And I imagine that it will. I don't know if it'll affect it immediately. And like I said, I do have some clients that are working right now to contact EDD because they want to stop paying because they've offered the job back. So that'll be very interesting. Time will tell what's going to happen, but yes, it should, because technically when you're on unemployment, you have to be available and ready to work. Now, they did give a little grace period on that because there was nowhere for anybody to work, right? It really, I mean, for the most part, unless you're an essential worker, there really wasn't like there was a lot of options. So they did give a little bit of a grace period on that, but my understanding is that grace period's ending here pretty quickly. If it hasn't already ended, I think originally they said it was 2 weeks. They might have extended it. So people should be getting back to work. So great question. Thank you. Yeah, you can interrupt me anytime to have me answer those anytime. Okay, so let's go to the remote work policy. So you might at this point be saying, you know, we're okay with some of our positions remaining a remote, or some of our employees. You may be letting people pick and choose. You may be designating, you know, we're going to go ahead and this whole, you know, departments now is going to work remote. Or you may be just deciding, you know what, we just decided till the end of the year, we're just not going to bring anybody back into the office. We're just going to do a remote work policy. So some of you may have put together a policy way back when I did that very first webinar, but I want you to revisit that policy. And if you didn't put together a policy, you should now, for sure, if you're going to continue this. So the purpose of this is if you're going to continue allowing employees to work remotely, make sure you revisit the policy you had, and you need to update it. And if you didn't have one, create one. Sorry, there's a lot on this slide, but I am going to make sure you guys get these slides. There is a lot, but I wanted to make sure I had everything. So obviously in your policy, who's eligible to work remotely? What's the start date? And if there's an end date, if applicable. And so it may be that you're starting it now, right? And you may decide it's an end date. You might say, well, we're going to do it for another month and we'll revisit it. Or you might say, like, this is it. This is the way we're going to work now. People are eligible to work remotely. If they choose to work it, they can. What are the requirements for accessibility? And what I mean by that is, what are you expecting from me in terms of getting a hold of me? I've seen policies written where it says we expect to get a hold of you during the workday. That's not clear enough to me. So if it's during their regular work hours, if it's during the hours between 8 and 5, what is it? Be a little more clear as you can be, of when you expect them to be available. What technology is required and to be used. So do they need to be available by cell, video conference, and email, maybe also text? I know I've shared before that I think one video conference a day is really helpful when people work remotely. So my team knows that they are supposed to be available by cell, video conference. We use Teams here. So we use Teams. So Teams by cell or email during their work hours. That's just how it works. So they know if I call. It doesn't mean, by the way, that someone's not allowed to take a break or miss a phone call because they've got something else going on. It just means that, you know, within reason, every time I contact them, if I contact them by video conference and they text me back every time, that kind of gives me a red flag that we're breaking down communication here. So I want to make sure we're interacting as regularly as possible. What reimbursements provided by you? What are you reimbursing them for? Are you doing a flat rate reimbursement? Are you doing like cell phone is one rate and then the internet service is another rate? And what are you doing for that? How about office supplies? Are they purchasing them and then submitting? So what's your program? And again, I can't tell you what your program is because you need to know what that is for sure. Anything that's not reimbursed. So this is an interesting section that I've recently added, which is, we're not reimbursing if you decide to eat lunch out. We're not reimbursing for, I'm trying to think of another personal expense that they might have. We're not buying office furniture right now. We're not, there's things like that. So you might want to just give a couple of examples, but definitely like food. We're not buying food for you while you're working remotely. And then, there may be tax or legal implications working from home, and that's on them. And so I usually say to the employee in this policy that they should look into their own tax and legal implications. I don't know if it affects, if they try to write off their home office. I don't know. I'm not a tax professional. That's between their accountant, how that actually works. I mean, of course I know because I worked from home for so many years, but I'm not in the position of giving that kind of advice. And also, are there any legal implications? Do you have to have a business license if you work from home? I don't know the answer. I mean, I know I ran a business from my home, so I had to have a business license. I don't think anything like that is required by our city, but I don't know for sure. So they should check, and it's on them to check on that now, and to make sure that they are following any laws that they should be following, etc. Of course, include your at-will statement that you can rescind this policy at any time, that it's not a forever and ever. It's not going to be, that's the way we've always done it. This is something you can rescind at any time. You want to discuss how you expect them to keep the security of your information and of the equipment you give them. So if you're giving them a laptop and you're giving them a cell phone and you give them a printer, or you give them an iPad, whatever you're giving them, how do you expect them to keep those things secure and safe? That there is some responsibility for them to make sure they're safe, as well as their responsibility to make sure information that they're using is safe and secure, and that they are maintaining, some confidentiality for anything that is confidential, that they shouldn't be allowing family members, access, and they want to be secure. Now, something I do in my business is I talk about open Wi-Fi. So none of my employees are ever allowed to log on to open Wi-Fi to do any business for me, because it's just not secure. So they have hotspots on all their phones. I was more than happy to buy them a hotspot, but they have to use a secure Wi-Fi connection. So if you feel that way also, you want to make sure that that's clear, and that then they have the tool to do that you've provided that tool. But they're actually prohibited from logging into like a coffee shop's Wi-Fi to work on my stuff. They can do whatever they want, but anything, because I don't want that out there. We have too many wonderful clients, like many of you here. Designated workspace requirements and workers' compensation. So that you want to tell them that they should have a designated workspace that is maintained well, that is clear of, and free of clutter. And then that if they do get injured at home, they are supposed to report it to you. And you might want to check in with your workers' comp carrier and just make sure you're covered. I'm sure that's going to be an interesting area that's going to have some developments as we all work more remotely, but just check in with your broker, ask them if there's anything that they recommend that you need to know. But you should tell your employees you expect them. Now, it doesn't mean you expect them to have an office, that's totally solely to work, but it's just like, hey, when you sit down to work, that it's a designated space, that you're being thoughtful. We don't have our arm up here and our computer, we're looking down, that we're trying to follow basic ergonomic principles, things like that. And then remind them that all of your policies and procedures still apply. So when we're at home, even though we're at home, or, even if down the road, we are able to go back and work in coffee houses, that's still working remotely, right? So they might not be at home, they might just be working somewhere else. All of your policies and procedures still apply. So whatever you have in place with your handbook and anything else, I just put a nice little reminder in there that they all apply. I have seen some of these policies where they'll remind people about harassment and discrimination, and you can certainly do that, and about your technology policy. But if you remind them that all policies and procedures apply, that covers all those policies. So you're not trying to summarize them and reword them in this policy. Okay, so there's a lot in there, but if you put all of that in your policy, you'd have a great policy. And you could do this. I usually like to do these individual and have the people who are eligible sign them personally, that they acknowledge that they've received it. They understand it's their responsibility to follow it. They know that you're an at-will employer. And if they have any questions, exactly who to contact for their questions. But I like to do these individual rather than putting it in. You could also include it in your handbook, but I like to keep this one separate with a signature just because it's really important that people understand it. Okay, so emergency paid sick leave requests. I just got a question. I guess this is what we're doing today. Let's mix it up. I know. Do I need to add extra coverage to our workers' comp insurance to cover remote office work? So I unfortunately don't know that question because I'm not a workers' comp expert. In the past, we never really had like this extra coverage we had to worry about. I have a feeling that the insurance companies might be looking at that right now, but your broker is a great place to start. Your broker is your friend when it comes to workers' comp. You're not notifying them of any red flags. You can just start to ask them, if that is something that that they think will be happening. But even if it does, and you have people work remotely, you're going to have them covered. I just want to mention this as a side note. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I just won't tell them. But if you ever have an injury that they have not known about or wasn't covered, they will not cover it. It will be a mess. So you have to get it covered. So if you're thinking about that in terms of remote work, just check in with them. I always think it's a good idea. So the emergency paid sick leave request. So the purpose of this form is for people who need emergency paid sick leave. Now, I have had a few of these requests. I have not had as many as I thought. We'll see how this all goes. So emergency paid sick leave, as you may recall, you have a poster that's up. And this is for really reasons related to being diagnosed with COVID-19. It's the paid time off for sick time, or to care for a family member who's been diagnosed. So that's what this is for. And again, I put together a letter because I want to be really clear that we have designated this properly, because that you are supposed to be eligible for a tax reduction at the end of the year for any emergency paid sick leave you pay out from now till December 31st of 2020. So I like documentation, because when they ask, when you're going for your tax credit, I want you to have it clearly documented, as well as I want the employee to be informed. So in that letter, what's the reason they qualify for EPSL? And you have a poster that lists out the different reasons. I actually put in literally the number, and I write exactly the reason from the poster in this notice. So there's no question about which number they qualify under and what that reason says. The number of hours that they're eligible to use, because although it is up to 80 hours, that is based on a 40-hour work week. Okay, it's 2 weeks, but 80 hours based on a 40-hour work week. So I just did a letter yesterday, and this employee only works 35 hours a week. So he's only eligible for 70 hours, right? That's it. The rates at which EPSL is paid. So is it paid, what's the rate that they're getting paid for that? What's happening to holidays on EPSL, and I'm assuming you would not pay out a holiday while they're on EPSL. You do not have to, but we are running into, it's funny, we were out of holiday season. Now we're starting to run into holidays again. So we want to address that. Communication in the interactive process. So in this section, this is where I say, basically, we're going to be communicating with you, and we may need to get a hold of you reasonably. We're not calling a person every day, especially if we're talking about, a 2-week time off with a maximum of 80 hours. But we may need to get a hold of you. And I usually, and you're going to hear about this in a second, but I send a lot of things by mail. So I say, we will be sending things to the address we have on file via USPS. So please make arrangements to receive those documents. Now, you may also say that you're going to reach out to them by email once in a while. You may do a phone call once in a while, something like that. But it is their responsibility to engage with you. So that's the interactive process. So where you might ask a question and they should respond. These are pretty quick, so I don't have a ton of stuff that I have to follow up on, but I always keep it in there just so I've been clear. When are they expected to return to work? Literally put the date in there that you're expecting them to return to work, and if they need an extension. Now, here's the thing with EPSL, there isn't more time that they get paid, right? That's it. If they max it out, there isn't more time. Now, if they use less time though, they could technically request an extension. So perhaps I'm only going to ask, I have 70 hours. I feel like if I could stay home for a week, this, based on what the doctor said on my exposure, I should be fine. Or, I'm going to go get tested and I get cleared and I only needed a week, something like that. But if they need more time, you want to explain to them how they get extension requests. Now I'm actually on the last bullet I have on here, the name, the title, the contact information for the contact. This is important. So there have been situations and where an employee's worked somewhere forever and known exactly who to contact. And then they go out on a leave and then they get terminated because they don't come back when they're expected to, and they're non-responsive because we didn't tell them they had to be responsive. And then they say, well, I didn't know how to get a hold of the company. And this really happens. So don't leave anything to assumption. Here's who you contact Ann Laguzza. She's our the human resources director. Here's her phone number and email. If you don't want them to contact me by email, you just put my phone number. However you want them to contact me, whatever is available to me, put it there very, very clearly. I usually put it at the top of the letter. What I usually say is, here is your contact person and information while you are absent for EPSL. And then I put it at the very bottom again, so they have it in two places of who they're supposed to be contacting. If you say contact their supervisor, make sure their supervisor knows how to handle all of this information, because they're going to get a phone call that says, hey, I'm feeling better. I think, the doctor said I can come back, but I was just wondering, can I cut a couple more days? There's going to be all this negotiation going on, and supervisors can be trained. They just have to be trained. And then of course the date, we said that they're expected to return to work. Yep. All of that. So, you just want to make sure that you've been thorough. But again, you put all of this in a letter, you're going to have a great template. You might even create a form out of it, that you'd want to do. So covers that. So then there's EFMLA, which is the Expanded Family Medical Leave Act, which is only if you need the time off to care for a child who does not have care right now, because we are in the middle of a pandemic. This one's really long. I mean, it's a little longer. Sorry about that. I just wanted to, again, make sure you had everything, but it's similar to what we've been through. So it's the reason they qualify for EFMLA, the number of weeks they're eligible to use, which if they've already used some, they might have less, but it's up to 12 weeks. The rate that they're paid, how you're handling the vacation and sick accrual. Normally we turn it off during leaves like this. So make sure you let them know you will not be accruing any vacation and sick leave, or PTO if you use that, while on EFMLA. What's happening to their holidays? Okay, how are we handling their holidays? What the communication and the interactive process, just like I mentioned before, returning to work and extension requests, the date that you expect them to return to work, the name, the title, the contact information, right? Do you guys see how it's very similar? And then if they use EPSL for the first 2 weeks, you have to tell them that it's available, because EFMLA is 12 weeks total. The first 2 weeks is unpaid, and the remainder time is paid by the employer at a percentage. They can choose to use EPSL for the first 2 weeks. So it's not mandatory though, they get to choose it. So you wanna make sure you let them know that it's an option. And then if they choose to use it, you want to make sure you've notated that they've decided to use it and the number of hours. And so you'd go back to that EPSL request and make sure you've covered everything in there. Well, you don't have to reduplicate anything like communication in the interactive process, but you want to make sure the reason, the number of hours, the rate at which they're paid, and then you'll cover everything else in the letter. So these are probably the two that have been the most challenging for our office. They seem like it would be so easy to write a template. And I have to tell you, every situation's been a little different. I had an employee take 1 day of EFMLA. No, 1 day of EPSL. I apologize for that. 1 day of EPSL. I've had employees take a few weeks of EFMLA. I've had employees take EPSL for, varying reasons. So it's something you just go slow and think through, and you'll be able to work through that process. So the notification process for the EPSL, the EFMLA, and really even your return to work letter, all documentation should be mailed via USPS. Even if you also send it as a locked PDF, or just as a PDF, it doesn't have to be locked. I can live with that. Please be If the employee is not working for you, if they're on leave already or they're furloughed, don't use their work email. They shouldn't have access to that. Okay, so you'd have to have their personal email. But even if you send it via email and you keep a copy of the proof that you sent it via email, always send it in the regular mail, and make sure that you keep a copy of the postmarked envelope and the letter that you sent in the appropriate file. So it depends on what it is. If it's anything medical related, it should be in the medical file. If it's the recall from work or from furlough, recall to work from furlough, it should be either in the employee file, or you could potentially put that in a payroll file if you wanted to. No special delivery, so don't require a signature, don't make it complicated. Now, sometimes my clients say, hey, I want to send this FedEx and I won't require a signature, they'll just drop it off. I can live with that because there's proof of delivery. You want something that shows the actual date that it was sent out, and so that you have that documentation. That's where the postmarked envelope becomes very important, because I have seen employees say, I never got it, or, oh, I didn't get it till well after the date. And unless you have proof of when it was sent, you're going to be put in a place of trying to state that you did mail it on time or did send it out on time. So really important. Texts and emails are too informal for notification only. I have seen leaves go awry really quickly because people start communicating by text and email, trying to just casually, hey, do you want to come back to work? Once you send out something literally in the mail, it really changes things. But like I said, you can use an overnight carrier as long as you don't require signature. So I probably should say why that is. The employee isn't there and they miss the document. They might have to travel somewhere to get it. They might be uncomfortable traveling right now. They might not have a way to get there right now. Then they ask for it to be redelivered. Maybe someone's not there. Again, they missed delivery again. So now you've tried to notify them, and now we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, however many days are passing by, and they have no notification. So the regular old school mail that we just put a postmark on and throw in the mail is still considered valid and completely appropriate for notification, even though it will take a few days for it to get there. So like I said, do not require any signature. Don't require that they have to do anything. Whatever process you use should be perfect. For the perfect process there is just to have it dropped off. And so whoever you use to do that, that's fine. Excuse me. Okay, let's move on to COVID-19 safety. So this is the document that the purpose of this one would be to document how your workplace safety program is going to be implemented. And I just went over a few things here because I've talked about this on one of our webinars. You're going to absolutely want to document your new safety requirements. And if you haven't heard the term injury and illness prevention plan, you're going to get very familiar with this. But this is even a document you're going to want to share. Well, the injury and illness prevention plan you can share with employees, but you want to make sure that this is shared with employees. If you're doing the temperature check procedure, I'm just going to give you some examples of safety requirements. Hand washing, conference room use, guest access, mask requirements, break room use. What are all your new safety requirements? They all need to be written down and explained, how they're going to work and what the process is. What supplies are you providing? Are you providing hand sanitizer? Believe it or not, now this may change. Last time I checked, you were just supposed to provide access to regular hand washing. Now I know everybody's going above and beyond and doing hand sanitizer, which is fine. But in many industries, I have not seen that as an actual requirement yet. But again, I didn't look yesterday. I don't know if I looked the day before. And the way things change, I want you to make sure you check. What will you be providing? Hand sanitizer, access to frequent hand washing. Are you providing masks? Fine. Anything else? Are you providing like every desk is going to have their own cleaning spray that they can use? Are you providing paper towels? What are you doing to provide for them? You might want to even state what you're not providing, okay, so that they know what you are not going to be providing because you're not obligated to. Now, I want to caution you to be a little, I know a lot of nonprofits are saying things like, well, we'll provide whatever the employee wants. And I literally saw a list the other day that was so long from an employee. And she said, I'm only coming back if you, and it was this unbelievable list of things. And it was very specific. Like, I want a specific kind of mask and a specific kind of hand sanitizer. And I want to make sure I have partitions up. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to have to consider reasonable accommodation, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, but I want you to be thoughtful about saying things like, we'll provide whatever you want, because people will start to make a list. So you be clear on what it is you're providing, what you're not providing, and, keep on top of what you're required to provide. And you might go above the requirement, by the way, and I'm fine with that. I think a little bit above is going to go a long way with your team. I have no problem with that, but I just want you to be aware. So you're going to get some reasonable accommodations, maybe not on day one, but I think ultimately people are going to start to hear about this if you're bringing people back to the office. I think that someone's going to have an allergy to a certain kind of hand sanitizer. Maybe the fragrance in the hand sanitizer is going to bother them. Perhaps if they have to wear gloves, they're going to have that, that there are people who can't wear latex gloves. There's going to be things that come up. And I'm going to, I try to keep your contacting an attorney to a minimum, because I know funding is always a challenge, but I'm going to tell you that I think every reasonable accommodation request, the very first thing you're going to need to do is listen very carefully and thoroughly, and make sure you understand what they're asking for. And before you say no, or before you say yes, I think you're going to want to consult with a legal person. It should be an employment attorney and someone who's able to help you with this. It doesn't mean you're going to have to do it forever. It doesn't mean this is going to be a new line item that you have to get passed by in your budget. I think it's going to be short term. And I think once you go through a few, you'll get good at it. I'm certainly always, available to help my clients with these things. But in this case, because things are people are feeling so cautious and there are so many changes in gray areas, I think it will be the money's well worth spent to make sure that we talk to them about it. Now, it's very common for people to easily go to, that's not in our budget. Well, we can't afford it. And if you've never done a reasonable accommodation, you may not know that there's actually a formula that the EEOC has put together to determine if something is financially affordable by an organization. And I'm going to guarantee you that it is more money than you think it is. So it doesn't mean you're going to always have to accommodate, but it might mean you're going to have to, even when you think it's not affordable. So that's why I think it's very important to get an attorney involved and make sure that we do this right. We don't want to mess this up for any reason. And I also know that our tendency might be on a really great high performer to be like, oh, whatever you need, we want to make your job so easy. But once you open that door, you got to open it for everybody. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then also in this template document that you're creating, who to report concerns to. So there are going to be concerns. So-and-so is not wearing their mask. Somebody else, I saw they didn't wash their hands after they were in the bathroom. They ran out of, spray to clean their desk or whatever it is. So you're going to want to make sure that someone's responsible for receiving these concerns. So that should be in there. Okay. All of that should be in there. Okay, so the last template I'm going to talk about, and then I have a couple of things I want to mention that are going to become, I think, hot topics for you all, and then I'm happy to take questions, is the integrity pledge. So one of my clients came up with this, and I thought I would share it with you. They said it was fine. And the purpose of this is to have all employees commit to their part in keeping the workplace safe. So they are currently working remotely. They're going to be bringing their employees back, and they're having them sign the integrity pledge. So what's included in that? A commitment to keeping the work environment safe. Everyone's commitment. So we all are committed to keeping the work environment safe. We will not report to work with any illnesses. We will we will follow all safety protocols. And I think it says, I will not report to work with any illnesses. I will follow all safety protocols. I will immediately report safety concerns. And if I am exposed to anyone diagnosed with COVID-19, will not report to work and immediately report this information to the designated person. And you can add some other things on there if you want, but I kind of love it. They're having everybody sign it because they are saying, listen, we get it. We're the employer. We have a lot of responsibility. We're going to do our part, but we can't do it by ourselves. We need you to be helping us. We need you. If we tell you we're going to take your temperature in the morning and you have to stand outside and wait for that, we need you to abide by that. Like you can't, try to come in the back door and sneak in and sit at your desk. So if we tell you you have to wear a mask all day, you have to wear a mask all day, so they want their employees to commit. I, like I said, I kind of love the idea, and it's reminding everybody that we all need to help each other keep the work environment safe. So I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was really kind of a great idea and another template you can create. So I'm going to answer any questions you all have. So feel free to start typing them in if you haven't already. But there are two things that I wanted to mention that weren't really template items, but there are things you are going to have to start dealing with. And Christina and I were talking about these earlier too. You're going to have employees that are taking this very seriously and other employees that are not taking it seriously. We are already seeing that just in our world in general. And if you're on social media at all, you see it all the time. Some people might be taking it more seriously because they are at risk, or they have people at home that are at risk, or they just are taking it seriously. They're like, you told me the rules, I'm following the rules. There's other people that are like, I don't know. Is it really that big a deal? I mean, it doesn't, I'm not really sure. I don't know anybody who got sick, all of that. You're going to have to be managing that aspect, and that does come out of your policy. So that's why your policies need to be clear. Like, these are the rules, and then you are going to have to hold people accountable to those rules. And as I've often said in many webinars, this will be a moment where you'll start to be able to pick out your low performers probably pretty quickly. There will be people that don't love your rules. They might not even, maybe they have a completely different belief of what's going on out there. But if you tell them what the rules are, they're going to follow them. They're going to tell you they don't love it. They're going to tell you maybe, God's just uncomfortable to wear my mask, or, I can't believe, not more than 2 of us can go in the conference room, or whatever, but they're going to do it. So that's something you really need to start preparing for. I think I always say, like, emotionally, like, what is going to happen, who's handling those issues, and they are going to come up. And another thing that I know that's starting to come up in discussion is that there's going to be a potential for discrimination and harassment. A lot of people say a lot of things that are inappropriate about the situation that we're in. And they do select certain races to talk about and make jokes. And it is going to be a potential problem for you all. So I think this would be a great time, if you haven't done your harassment training for 2020, let's get it done. And you're going to want to do a reminder on that when we bring everybody back to work, that we, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And if I tell you, I think you shouldn't wear a mask, that's not discrimination or harassment, legal discrimination or harassment. But there are things that are, in terms of talking about race, and then talking about maybe why somebody doesn't want to wear a mask or something like that. They could start picking on religion or something like that. So we're going to need to be aware of that. And religious accommodation could potentially come into play at some point too. So we'll just have to look at all of that. But I want to just remind you, discrimination and harassment is something you're going to want to be extra aware of, that could potentially be going on. Every time we get into a political year, it's always tough because creed is a protected class. And so your political beliefs are, you can establish that the workplace is politics free, and that's fine. But people do start to have discussions about who they're voting for, or why they're voting for or not voting for someone. And that can cause issues in the workplace that have to be addressed. And I think you combine that with the pandemic that we have going on, and there's a lot of feelings about that. You're going to have some challenges. So I just want you to get ready for that. So with that, that's my part of it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go back to the Q&A and let's see what questions you have. Okay, we talked about that. What if someone does request a partition? Under what circumstance? So again, that needs to be, so that's part of an interactive process when someone requests sort of an accommodation. So I guess the conversation I would have is, tell me about that. Tell me why you're concerned. And then we will, and I usually try to find out what their expectation is, right? Are they expecting you to build them a whole new cubicle? Are they telling you if you hung up shower curtains, would that be okay? You might move them. I mean, you might have another space for them that you could move them to. So I kind of have a conversation a little bit about, you say partition, what does that mean to you? Okay, let us think about this. Thank you for, making this request. Let us think about this and determine what we can reasonably accommodate, and we will get back to you. And you want to do that quickly, and you're going to want to document all that you had an interactive discussion, you found out what their concerns were, you determine if you can reasonably accommodate it, and you go back to them if you can. one of my clients yesterday just told me they did put up a partition for an employee because they requested it. It was, they want just like plexiglass or one of those, kind of like what they have in the grocery store. So they're doing that. They said, we'll do it. And I said, are you okay if other people, approve or want that as well? And they said, yeah, I mean, we'll do it for anybody who wants it. So, but again, if you can't be in that position where you're like, we'll do it for anybody who wants it, then you definitely want to make a contact with a good employment attorney who can assist you with working through if that accommodation is reasonable or not and handling that correctly. Because we don't want a disability discrimination claim on our hands in the middle of all this. Every attorney I know is telling me that the attorneys are just waiting for the claims because they know they're going to have a lot of them, not only disability, but probably wage and hour, especially from all this working remotely. There's going to be, there definitely is a legal faction, I think, out there that's waiting. Love my attorneys, by the way. Okay, so let's see. With part-time employees whose hours are reduced due to COVID-19, can we inform them to apply for unemployment, or if they ask us about the reduced hours? Oh, yes. When you reduce their hours, one of the things you should have put in the letter, and if you didn't, you can do it now, is that they're eligible to apply for unemployment, and you give them the link to the brochure or the actual brochure. You can, if you're emailing, I'm always assuming you guys are kind of emailing, you can email it to them. I would put that letter also, of course, in old school mail, but, and with the brochure. But yes, you can absolutely, anyone can apply for unemployment. I don't know that they'll always get it. Again, it seems like it's been a little more relaxed right now, but just because they apply doesn't mean they're going to get it. And you're going to report what you report to unemployment in terms of the questions they ask you, and then they'll make a decision. Can you put the previous slide back up with the integrity pledge? Oh, I love that. Absolutely. Hold on. There you go. And you guys will get these too. I thought that was a good idea. Hopefully you do too. That's why you asked to see it again. I thought it was great. I was really happy. They're very good sharers. They have shared many things with me. They've done many things that I find very intriguing and something I hadn't been approached with yet. And they're very good about me sharing with everybody. And I really appreciate that. How or what parts of this apply to independent contractors and or students in our program? Well, independent contractors are under independent contractor agreements. I mean, you are going to want to make sure that if they are coming into your work environment, that they're abiding by your safety regulations, just like you would otherwise. You are going to want to, that is another good thing to talk to an attorney about, by the way. You are going to want to protect yourself in terms of COVID-19 if at all possible. So I'm an independent contractor. I'm incorporated, but still I'm independent. I come into your work environment. I teach a harassment prevention class. I get COVID-19. Am I coming back to you and saying you're the reason? Maybe, right? I wouldn't, but maybe. So I would, that's 100%. I would talk to an attorney. Always try to say what kind. Probably it's going to be an attorney that actually writes contracts. But you may start with your employment attorney and get their input, but your contract attorney will help you. But you may want to start requiring your independent contractors to have some type of clause that makes it so you are not responsible. I think that's called an indemnity clause, but I am not an attorney, so please check with your attorney. Great question. And yeah, of course, your independent contractors and students. I mean, again, I'm assuming we're talking about like interns, things like that. And again, you will definitely want to make sure that they're following the rules. And if you have a contract with the school, which you should, you want to review that contract and see, is there any other language you need to include in there? Now that this has happened, what do we need to do to protect ourselves? And that also might be another question for your broker. Like, so let's just say we have an independent contractor claims they got sick here. How does that work? Because workers' comp covers independent contractors too. So how does that work? So that was a fantastic question. And I think we're going to have to do a little fact finding. I'm going to put it in order of where I would start because it's less expensive. I would start with my workers' comp broker and ask them, because they may cover it, and they may say to you, oh, we cover independent contractors. And you're gonna be like, okay. Then I would talk to probably a contract attorney would be my next choice. Someone who actually writes contracts, to ask them what their thoughts are on that in terms of putting something in your making the independent contractor put something in their contract, or you would provide them with an addendum that they sign, releasing you of responsibility. And you may do both. Like it may be like, you know what? we're going to do both just to double check, double cover ourselves. So, and then I would go to an employment attorney, I think, third on that. Thank you for giving me that. That was good. I started thinking. You got me thinking now. I mean, I'll tell you what, even in just basic things like, gyms and things like that, they're re-releasing their liability waivers, or they should be, because they're, everyone's concerned, right? If you come to my establishment and you get sick here, am I responsible for that? Am I paying for that? And, we know there's all levels of sick, and we certainly hope it's not the worst case scenario. But there are going to be potentially, medical bills and things like that. Can I require a staff member who's called in sick to get a COVID test before returning to work? You can require that they provide you with either medical documentation that they're clear or a test. I was so excited last night, if you guys didn't see, that the mayor has now opened up testing to everybody in Long Beach. So if you're in Long Beach, that's fantastic. But in that situation, they would be able to get a test because they potentially have been exposed. I would ask them if the symptoms are related to COVID-19, right? So, because somebody could, you did say sick, so I'm assuming they have a runny nose, a cough, something like that. So I might say, do you have any symptoms related to COVID-19? Or because if it's just a headache, and I don't know at the top of my head if that's been added to the list. Some of you might know. I know that list keeps getting longer and longer, but I'm going to say, my easy answer is I'm going to say yes. You can, and for sure, you can ask for medical clearance, or they need to get a COVID test. But I'm going to put all that in writing, because I just had an employee say that their doctor said they were to stay home until their cough goes away. Well, that could be 2021. I don't know what we're talking about here. So we're putting some documentation together in writing. And we're actually giving that employee 14 days to get us some documentation, at least contact their medical provider and give us some update, because that seems like a little open-ended to me. Maybe the doctor did say that. I don't know if they meant literally forever and ever until a cough goes away. Because I don't know about all of you, but my allergies are starting to act up, and I do have a cough every once in a while. So we just want to make sure we're not leaving this position open, because they're holding this position for him, and I don't want them to hold it, for 6 months if they could get clearance sooner. We provide music education. Oh yeah, for in-school and out-of-school kids. Yeah, absolutely. So you'll definitely want to explore that further for sure. But yeah, the times are a little bit different in terms of, when you recall people, you should be asking them if they are currently experiencing any symptoms of COVID-19, if they have been exposed to anyone within the last 14 days that were diagnosed with COVID-19. And obviously if they answer no to both of those questions, that's fantastic. If they say, well, I have been having a little, fever, or I'm not feeling 100%, then it might be well, we do want to recall you, but we need you to go ahead and contact a medical provider and or go get tested and let us know. The medical provider notes are way easier to get now too. I know in the beginning there was a lot of CDC saying don't require notes, but everyone's been getting them. I've been getting the, the telehealth notes. They're showing up. There's so many notes now. So they should be able to get that for sure. And again, the issue is kind of long-term. You're trying to protect everybody. And this is such an unusual situation. Now, we don't have any rights to dig deeper into someone's health condition for other reasons, right? So I broke my arm, or, I hurt my hip. You can't start asking about that at this point. We still can't violate HIPAA, but we are allowed to ask a few questions. Okie dokie, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. Oops, so here, and then we have, let's see. So we are looking, oh, you're welcome. We are looking forward to moving back to the office, in around July 1st. And thank you, my pleasure. So
just before, hopefully Richard's still on, but he might not be, but the TNP webinar that we're looking at hosting on June 5th is about reopening Long Beach nonprofits. Yay. So it is guidance along those lines. So if you, we're putting that together today, and hopefully getting it out to everybody in an email, so you can register later today. So just check your email boxes, stay awake for that. But we're hoping to put together a great number of panelists that will help guide us in these particular policies and what we need to do in order to reopen our offices. So that's what we're hoping to do. And yeah, and you know what, Janet, so hopefully we'll be able to put together that and let you all know. And I think if we have any more questions coming in, just lots of thanks. And
Yeah,
I know we're
thank
just a little bit over
you.
time. Thank you so much, Anne. Again, fantastic information for putting it together. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing what happens. I think we're coming back, I think, in 2 weeks for our next one.
Yes.
So we'll hopefully see you all as well. And everybody else, just have a great weekend. Thank you all so much. And thanks again to the Josephine S. Gumbinder Foundation for sponsoring these check-ins. We truly appreciate it. But for everybody, have a great weekend. And Anne, thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.